the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you have your computer completely set up for development on Android, and then you have Unity installed, and then you have downloaded the Daydream Unity package. The links to do those things I'm going to have down in the video description, so you can check those out when you get ready to do this. So get those things installed. You're going to need to set up the Android SDK and the NDK, and then install Unity, and then, like I said, download that Unity package. So get those things done, and then come back to this video, and we can get started. For those of you who already have your stuff set up, we can go ahead and launch Unity, and we're going to create a new project. And we're going to choose a 3D project because we're doing VR. We're going to store it wherever we want, put it anywhere you like. I'm just going to leave mine on the desktop so I can clean it up later. And I'm going to turn off this Unity Analytics stuff because we're not going to be using that for this. So we're just going to get rid of it so we don't have to mess with it. I'm going to choose Create Project. And Unity is going to load a bunch of stuff for us and then bring up the Unity editor. Brings it up in the wrong window. All right, so here's the Unity editor. The far left here, this panel, is our scene hierarchy. This is where we see all of the things that are in our scene, and we see how they're nested within each other. This main window is our scene. This is the area where we're going to look at the 3D view of our elements, so we can arrange stuff here, we can move stuff around. It has a second tab that is our game view, and this is going to show us what our camera is rendering, and when we play the game, it's going to jump over to this tab so that we can see what's going on. Down here at the bottom, we have our project panel, and this is where we have all of our assets. This is where our models, our plugins, our prefabs, our textures, anything that we create to go into our game is going to go in this folder. And then off to the right here we have our inspector. The inspector is a context sensitive area, so whatever you're doing, like whatever you have selected, whatever you're messing with, it's going to show up in the inspector to give you more information about it so you can edit stuff there. Before we get started, we have to set some stuff up, so we have to go to File, Settings, and it's going to bring up this build settings window. We need to tell it that we're going to be developing for Android, so I'm going to choose Android in this list, and I'm going to click Switch Platforms, and that's going to set Unity to export Android code, and it's going to, if you had any assets loaded in, it would go through and it would tweak those assets to be more mobile friendly. Now we're going to click Player Settings, and we're going to come down here. The first thing we're going to do is in Other Settings, down here where it says Minimum API Level, we're going to change that to Android 7.0 Nougat API Level 24. That's the lowest Android API you can target with Daydream, because that's where Daydream was introduced. If you want to target Android builds before that, you can still use the Daydream stuff. Okay, and Daydream's pretty cool. I mean, sorry, not Daydream, Cardboard stuff. Cardboard's pretty cool. You can look around, but you don't have the controller. So you have to decide what you're going to target and then change your control scheme based on that. Down a little further in this window, at the very bottom, there's this XR settings panel, and we're going to check this box that says that virtual reality is supported. And then we're going to choose which VR SDK we want to use. So I'm going to click this plus button, and I'm going to choose Daydream. And see, there's Cardboard right there. So if you want to support older phones, you can choose Cardboard. You can choose both. I'm going to just choose Daydream because I'm going to push it right to my Pixel 2. So I'm going to leave that there, and that's everything we need from that. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to come up to Assets, Import Package, and then choose Custom Package. So this is going to let us load in the Unity Google VR stuff that we downloaded. So this Google VR for Unity package, we're going to double click that, and it's going to load in a bunch of assets for us. This is going to show us a window of all the stuff that it's going to load in. I'm going to click import and then talk. This contains models that show the controller for the Daydream headset. It has textures, it has prefabs for all the stuff that we're going to need to be able to create our scene and talk to the phone. So we're going to go ahead and let that import. And while it's doing that, I'm going to grab my headset here. Okay. Now this is going to take a little bit because, like I said, it's reading in all those assets, all those images and sounds and objects and models and all that stuff. And when it's finished, you'll see this folder down here in your assets called Google VR. And if we open that up, we see it's got a lot of stuff in there. It's got some pre-built demos that are very cool. You can play with those. It's got some scripts to help with the editor, fonts, legacy stuff. I'm not sure what's in there. Materials are the images and material files that you're going to need to actually like texture objects in your game. Models, has models for the like tooltips, has models to simulate the controller in VR space. Most of the stuff we're going to be pulling from is going to be from this prefabs folder though. Prefabs in Unity are objects that have been created, and then you can add scripts to them, you can add behaviors, you can add other components, and then you can save that configuration so that you can use it later, which is pretty cool. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to come up to our hierarchy here, and we're going to right click and we're going to create empty. This is going to create an empty game object that we can use to attach things to. So this just represents some point in space. In the inspector, you see now that this is selected, the inspector has information about it, and right now all it has is a transform, which is perfect, and a name. So I'm going to change the name to player, and then instead of having its position be 0, 0, 0, I'm going to choose a reasonable human height. So I'm going to say 1.6 meters is how tall that thing is going to be. That's how far off of the ground our player is going to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag the camera and drop it on our player. So now our camera position, we're going to clear that out and make it 0, 0, 0 so that it is right in line with our player. So our player is at the origin, but 1.6 meters in the Y direction. So it's at 0, 1.60, and then we're making our camera 0, 0, 0 so that it's not offset from the player at all. So it's also going to be at the world position of 0, 1.60. Okay, and now we want to add some stuff to the scene so we can actually see something when we load VR. So I'm going to create a plane. I'm going to right click again in this hierarchy panel. Going to go down to 3D objects and choose plane, and it's going to create a plane for us in there. And I'm going to right click again, go to 3D objects and choose sphere. So by default it's going to put everything at 0, 0, 0 when we create it that way. So I'm going to look at the top and move some stuff around. So I'm going to click on my player and I'm going to move them back a little bit away from the sphere. And then I'm going to click on the sphere and move it forward a little bit. So when we look at the camera view, we see our sphere out ahead of us, right? And then I'm going to click on this button to get the X view. And I'm going to move my sphere up into the air a little bit so it looks like it's hovering. So we see it hovering right above the ground, right? Okay, so now if I hit play, it's going to build all this stuff and then it's going to run our game. But there's no VR built in here yet, right? This is just Unity rendering a 3D scene. So now we have to add some of the prefabs to make this work with Daydream. So the first thing I'm going to add is this in the Assets, Google VR, Prefab folder. And we have this GVR Editor Emulator. This lets you simulate interacting with your headset or controller inside of the Unity editor, which can be handy, right? So if you're trying to debug stuff you don't want to have to throw on the headset, you can use a combination of mouse controls and keyboard controls to do stuff. And here it shows what those are. So if you use Alt plus move the mouse, you're going to change the yaw and pitch of the headset. And if you use Control and mouse, you're going to roll the headset, right? Okay, so we're going to add that in there just so we might use it later. We're going to need this event system. This event system is what lets Daydream tie into Unity's default event system. If you've never used Unity before, it lets you map different kinds of events to your custom methods. It's super handy, and this is what lets the Unity or the Google VR stuff pipe events into the Unity event system. The next thing we're going to add is instant preview. This instant preview prefab is what lets Unity push it to your headset so you can see it on your phone or see it in your Google VR, your Daydream View headset directly from Unity. And let's go ahead and build that and push that. Now that we do this, it should push it directly to my phone. Okay, so if I bring my phone up, you see it's telling me to put it in my headset and turn on my controller. Okay, so turn on the controller. Alright, now that it's done this, let me stop Unity and try again. Now that the instant preview is actually loaded on the phone. Okay, there. So now we can see on my phone, I can look around, and what I see is also being reflected in Unity, right? All right, so let's stop that. So I mean, that's like a great first step, right? We've done VR now. We put that in our headset. We can look around this scene that we created, and I mean, it's not interactable, but at least we're seeing something in virtual reality. Okay, so let's now do some interaction. Okay, in order to be able to do interaction, I need to add the prefabs to my scene that talk to the controller. Let me go ahead and move this phone out of the way. All right. So I'm going to come back to this prefabs folder. I'm going to go to controller, and I'm going to get this GVR controller main prefab, and I'm just going to put that at the root of my hierarchy. And then I'm going to get this GVR controller pointer prefab, and I'm going to drop that on my player. So that's connected to my player. All right. And now when we launch this, you can see the controller is there. And we notice that it's going away, right? Oh, let me bring up the phone again. We can see that in the 3D view, oh, now it's detached. And it's taken us to Daydream. Cool. Okay. I think this is how OBS is interacting with it, because I've not had these problems before. Okay. So now we see the controller, and we can see that the controller is like going away in weird ways. And the reason for that is the near clipping setting on the camera. So what that means is our camera is something called a frustum. It's a shape that you can think of it like a pyramid without a top, right? So the closer, let's see if we can see it here in Unity. If I go to Y and choose my camera, yeah, okay. So we can see, let me hide the plane real quick so we can see it easier. So when I click on main camera, we can see these lines here create a pyramid without a top. Oops. So the end is capped off, and then it goes out wider. That is called a frustum, and what that does is that dictates how your scene scales as things go further away from the camera. So as things go further away, they get smaller, just like they do when you're looking at them. That's all dictated by the shape of this frustum. So what's happening is our controller is close enough to the camera that it's being clipped out by this. This is called the near plane. So it's being clipped out by the near plane, so it's not being rendered. So what we have to do is click on our camera, come to clipping planes, and we're going to change the value of our near clipping plane to be something crazy close, like 0.01, something like that. And when we launch it again, let me bring the phone up. And so apparently I have to, oh no, there we go. Okay, so now we see the controller, and when I bring it up, it's not being clipped anymore, right? Because it's not going through that near clipping plane. Okay, and we also see we have that pointer at the end. So when I point at the ball, it's not currently doing anything, but that's where the end of our pointer is. Okay, so let's turn that off. Let's turn our plane back on. So now we want to be able to actually use that ball on the end of our pointer to interact with our sphere. To do that, on the camera, I'm going to add a component. So I'm going to click on camera, and then over here in the inspector, I'm going to click add component, and I'm going to look for, I'm going to search ray. And what I want is I want this GVR pointer physics raycaster. So I'm going to choose to add GVR pointer physics raycaster. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to cast a ray out of the pointer, and it's going to look for objects that it's going to interact with. And then it's going to, when it touches something, it's going to pump those events into the Unity event system so that we can listen for them. Just to prove that this is working, we're going to write a super simple script. So I'm going to click on the sphere, and I'm going to click add component, and I'm going to create a script just called event listener. And that doesn't already exist, so I'm going to click new script, make sure it says C#, and then click create and add. And then that's going to put this script down here in our assets, and I can double click that to edit it. And by default, what's going to happen is that's going to open in MonoDevelop on Mac, and I think it defaults to Visual Studio on Windows if you have that installed. But this is just an empty script, an empty Unity script. It has two methods by default. Start happens when you enable the object or turn on the game, and update happens when every frame. So start will happen once, and update will happen every frame. Just to show what's going on, I want to change the color of the ball. So to change the color, I need to get the renderer for that ball, the thing that's actually drawing that ball on the screen. So I'm going to say private renderer, and I'm going to call it _renderer. And then on start, I'm going to ask the object that we're attached to give me its renderer. So I'm going to say game object with a lowercase g is a reference to the object this script is attached to, which in our case is the sphere. And I'm going to say get component. And then I'm going to say the type of component that I'm looking for is a renderer. So I'm going to say give me your renderer, basically. Give me the component that you have that is of type renderer. And I'm going to store that in this renderer variable that I made. Okay, so when we start, we're going to grab the renderer. We're not going to do something each frame. We're just going to create two new methods that are going to tell us when the pointer has gone on the sphere and when the pointer has gone off the sphere. So let's do that. I'm going to say public void on enter. And in here, I'm just going to take that renderer and get its material, and set the color of that material to red. Okay, so when we move the pointer over the sphere, it'll turn red. And then I'm going to make another method that is public void on exit. And on exit, I'm just going to get the material again, and I'm going to set its color back to white. Okay, so the two methods are on enter and on exit. So when we hover the pointer over the ball, it's going to turn red, and when we take it off of the ball, it's going to turn back to white. Now we just need to hook those methods up into the Unity event system. So I'm going to come back into Unity, and I'm going to look down here at the bottom to tell me if there's any errors in the script that I wrote, and it doesn't seem to. So I'm going to click on Sphere, and in the inspector over here, I'm going to add another component. And this component is going to be an event trigger. Okay, so I'm going to search event. I'm going to find event trigger. And then I'm going to add a new type of event for pointer enter. Pointer enter is the event type for when the pointer goes over an object. So I'm going to click plus to add a new event or a new action to happen. The object that contains the action that I want to run is the sphere. So I'm going to come over here to my hierarchy. I'm going to grab the sphere and I'm going to drop it in this box. Right? So this is the thing that contains the action I want to run. And then that enables this drop down. So this drop down is going to show us all the methods that exist on that object. So I'm going to come down to event listener, which is the script that I created, and I'm going to choose on enter. So on pointer enter, the sphere is going to call on enter. And then I'm going to add a new event type for pointer exit. And it's going to fill in the sphere for me already. And I'm going to choose that I want event listener on exit. So pointer enter will call the spheres on enter method, and pointer exit will call the spheres on exit method. Okay, so let's get our phone ready. Let's hit play. Let's get our pointer. Okay, so we have our pointer, and when I hover over the sphere, it turns red. And when I go off the sphere, it goes back white. Okay, so now we're highlighting it. So what happens now if we want to grab the sphere? How are we going to grab the sphere? What we're going to do there is we're going to have two different methods. Again, for when we click down and then when we let up. So let's go back to our script. So we have on enter and on exit. So we're going to highlight and unhighlight. So I'm going to create public void on grab. And that's when we click down, I'm going to say that I want to get the transform. So transform is the X, Y, Z position, the rotation, the scale of a thing. So I want to get the transform of our pointer. So we're going to get a transform, pointer transform. Transform equals GVR pointer input module dot pointer dot transform. Okay, so I'm getting the transform. Oh nope, dot pointer transform. So I'm getting the transform of the actual pointer end, the part in space that is now touching our sphere, right? And then I'm going to set the position of I'm going to set our sphere to be the child of that thing. And then I'm going to set our sphere's position to 0, 0, 0. So it's going to be paired, it's going to be connected right to that object. And as we move that object around, it should move the sphere as well. So I'm going to say the transform of our sphere set parent is going to be our pointer transform false. So world position stays. That means that it's going to stay where it was in world position and just adjust the local position to make that happen. We don't care, right? We don't want that to be the case. We want it to stay on the pointer. And then I'm actually going to set our local position, transform.local position equals vector3.0. So this is just going to clear out anything in the local position. So it's going to snap, when we click on it, it's going to connect to the pointer ball, and then as we move the pointer ball around, the sphere is going to stay with it. Now we need to release it. So on release, we're going to take our transform and unparent it. So we're going to remove its parent because we don't want it to be the pointer anymore. So to do that, I'm just going to set its parent to null. But this time I do want it to keep its world position, right? So when we deparent it from where it was, we want it to stay in space where it was. Okay, so that should be enough for that. Now let's go back to Unity and add those two events to our event system here. So pointer down. Well, it's building our script. Okay, so I added pointer down, and that's going to be event listener on grab. And then pointer up is going to be event listener on release. So when we push down on the trackpad, which is this part of the controller, when we push down on that, we're going to call our on grab method. And when we let up, we're going to call our on release method. Okay? So let's give that a shot. Okay, so here we are in VR. Here's our pointer. Highlights. So when I click, our ball is behind us somewhere. Where is... Oh, there it is. So it's actually connected... No? So where is it? So let's look at our scene. So our ball has connected to our camera. So that's not what we want. So let's look at our code and see what we've done wrong. Pointer transform local position 0. False. Set parent that. So that should be right. All right, well, let's put a breakpoint here and see what happens. Okay, so we put a breakpoint, we come back to Unity, we run. And we click. So pointer transform position is 0, 0, 0. Oh, that's its local position. Position is 0.1, 1.3, and then negative 2.9, which makes total sense. I mean, that seems like it'd be... So it's like almost 3 meters away from us, which is cool. So now our transform, our position is 1.8, 4.1. Okay. So when I step over, that's going to adjust our local transform, or our transform, not our local transform. So our position got changed because it's offsetting based on where we were. Right, because our local position was this, and then we parented to that other thing, which changed our position to this, our world position to this. And so when I step over this, we should be able to set our local position to 0. So our local position is now 0, and our world position is exactly where the pointer is. Oh. So I wonder if what's happening is we set our position, and as the ray touches it, it comes closer and closer. So like each frame, it gets closer to us. So let's do this. Instead of setting it to 0, let's set it to new vector 3. 0, 0, 2. So that way it's not, our raycast is not actually hitting it anymore. Ooh, what's this? Okay. So that way our raycast doesn't actually hit it anymore. Let's see if that works. So let's go back to Unity. Stop this. Let's try running it again. Okay, so there's our pointer. Click it. Ooh, it brought it closer. Wonder why it brought it closer. Okay, but now we can grab it. It's going to bring, no, it's just going to set it some distance away. Interesting. Okay, so if I keep clicking, does it bring it closer? It does not bring it closer. Okay, so let's see if we can figure out why that is. What if instead of doing this, we let it adjust the local position so that it stays where it is when we've clicked on it. Okay. Yeah, that's what we want. Okay, so we want it to go ahead and leave that position, and then I can drag it around, and then I can stop it there. All right. Cool. So let's turn off the phone. And then come back here. So what we changed in our code is we didn't reset the local position. We just let it stay where it was. So by default, Unity is going to give you the option to, when you change the parent, adjust it such that the local space is the same, or I'm sorry, the world space is the same. So it's going to adjust this object's local space to leave it in the position it was in when you first started. So there. We've set up our scene. We have added VR looking around. We have added being able to highlight and unhighlight so we can detect when we're hovering on an object, and we can detect when we're clicking on an object, and we can drag that object around and drop it. So that's a pretty good start, right? That will let you build simple things like the IKEA VR room decorator thing, where you can grab items and move them around. And from there, you can start building in physics so that when you grab this thing and move it, you can let go and throw it, right? So all of that stuff should be pretty easy to sort of extrapolate from this. This is just a good base to get you started. All right, so thank you all for watching. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitch or on YouTube. And I'm going to post this video shortly after.